The show begins with Alma taking off with Marta in her car. She asks her to keep the entire thing about the experiment a secret, which the confused kid agrees to do. Meanwhile, Julia and Hugo are locked in a cell as they are held for further interrogation on Major Merida's murder. Julia prepares for the worst as soldiers arrive to pick her up. Thankfully, the police officers let her go, on account that they do not yet have enough evidence on Julia. She is then given an urn that supposedly contains Carlo's ash. Julia pays her respects to Carlo, saying goodbye one more time, as she spreads his ashes out into the wind. Emilia has also arrived at the station, and hugs her daughter. She urges Julia to leave the city before it's too late, to which our heroine agrees. In the meantime, it is revealed that Carlos is still being held by the soldiers, and all of this was a big ploy by the head of security, Major Enrique, to try and crack Julia. With a gun to his head, Major Enrique changes his mind at the last second and decides to put Carlos to good use. If Carlos agrees to do what he says, then his mother, Julia, and Hugo won't be killed. In the next scene, Emilia has Alex go back to the Resistance building, where the young woman Rosa and her father live. She wants Rosa's help in transporting Julia out of the city. Arriving at the residence, Rosa tells him to leave though, as they have more important matters to deal with. Inside the bedroom, a sick lady holding a baby to her breast is struggling, and she's due to be moved to another city that night. Alex walks in despite Rosa's protest and sees Daniela looking after the infant. Upon closer inspection, Alex sees that the sick lady is already dead from childbirth. This causes a pretty big problem as the baby starts crying. Rosa, Alex, and Daniela try to calm down the baby, but to no avail. As the baby wails, the soldiers on the streets hear a commotion in the flat and head up to investigate. Alex and Daniela quickly sneak out the back with the baby while Rosa pretends to care for her sickly parents. Thankfully, the soldiers are convinced, so they leave her alone. Arriving on the street, Daniela tells Alex that she will look after the baby, but the latter clearly doubts her. He warns her of trouble when her parents find out about the baby. In the meantime, Alma arrives at Emilia's house and Marta finally reunites with her family. Hugo profusely thanks the minister's wife before she's invited in for some water. With Alma watching, Marta stays mum and refuses to disclose anything that happened to her when Hugo and Julia ask her. Additionally, Alma checks Emilia out and tries to intimidate her about her relationship with Louis, but Emilia only says that they used to be good friends. Suddenly, she gets a call from her facility, so she has to hurry away. Back at the lab, Alma finds her Dr. Thomas strung up by the neck, and it looks like he has hung himself. She further learns from Major Enrique that he confiscated the report from Thomas that consists of detailed information on the experiments in the facility. However, it shockingly turns out that Alma and Major Enrique together staged the suicide and actually killed the doctor, as she could not trust him anymore. Major Enrique is clearly on Alma's side despite the crimes, and he has also been sleeping with her. Elsewhere, Marta sits with her grandmother Emilia and tells her story involving spying on Alma and her doctor one night. She and her friend had seen a projection on the wall, which the doctor was showing to Alma. In the projection, the doctor talks about how some of the children, including Marta, were special subjects. Emilia is clearly confused, but she does suspect something fishy about the whole Alma thing. Meanwhile, Daniela returns home with the baby and heads straight to the kitchen where Hugo and Julia are working. The couple learns about the situation and tries to look after the baby. However, Minister Louis arrives in the kitchen and warns his daughter, telling her that keeping a baby from Sector 2 isn't a good idea. He then makes alternate arrangements with the orphanage, much to Daniela's annoyance. Unwilling to listen to her father, Daniela, with the help of Hugo and Julia, sneaks the baby out of the house. As the group plan to smuggle the baby out, Alex then joins them and reveals that the baby's father is expecting her back on the other side of the town. Moreover, there is a transport lined up for tonight, and since the baby's mother is dead, there is a spot for Julia, which could be just the ticket she needs to leave the city. As the group begins their risky endeavor, the minister's son Ivan sees them on their way out. Ivan seems to be high on drugs, so he promises to keep his lips sealed. The trio then breathe a sigh of relief and head for the rendezvous point. However, they are stopped at an ID checkpoint just before entering Sector 2. Hugo and Julia manage to get their pass. However, Alex didn't have a return pass with him, so the trio is arrested. Hugo and Julia try to persuade the soldiers by saying that they work for the health minister. To confirm this, the soldiers decide to call the minister. Louis receives a call from the barrier checkpoint. Thankfully, Louis vouches and learns about the trio's arrest. Before leaving his mansion to help them, he warns his daughter Daniela about getting involved in such a matter because she doesn't yet realize the potential repercussions. Thankfully, Louis, out of respect for his old friend Emilia, helps her daughter Julia, Hugo, and Alex as they are free from the soldiers. Arriving at the rendezvous point, Julia and Hugo bid their goodbyes as the former is hustled on the truck with the baby. As she heads off, she reads a letter from Emilia wishing her well in the future. Suddenly, a police car stops the truck by the side of the road for an inspection. Only, this is a trap. Moments after, armed guards circle around the vehicle and start firing a barrage of bullets. Screams of horror are heard from inside the truck. As it goes silent, the soldiers open the back door and it appears everyone is dead apart from the baby. Thankfully, it turns out that Julia had decided against leaving the city after all, so she is alive and well. In a flashback, we see Julia getting out of the truck after she finished reading her mom's letter. She was too emotional to leave her family behind. Julia returns home and hugs her mother warmly. After dinner, Hugo heads in to check on Marta but finds her door locked. An armed assassin happens to be right there, but he slips away before any harm can be done to Marta. It is later revealed that the assassin is none other than Carlos himself. The following morning, the news about the shooting incident is circulated around, due to which Emilia and the family are taken completely by surprise. They are clearly devastated and enraged, as the government calls the resistance terrorists. After the break-in last night, Hugo is on high alert, and he thus decides to take Marta along with him to work. Meanwhile, Julia finds a key as she is tucking Marta's bed. The key turns out to be Carlo's blind mother's apartment key. Julia then goes to visit her, who very much looks in bad shape after her son's supposed death. After this, she joins Hugo and Marta on the line to get a pass to cross the barrier. Marta keeps on forgetting that she has to call Aunt Julia Mom. The trio get their pass and head to the minister's mansion. The head maid Silva then gives them a list of grocery items to buy as they have a celebratory party tonight. It turns out that Alma has just been named the new director of epidemiology. As Hugo and Julia get ready to go to the grocery, the latter confesses to visiting Carlo's mother. Hugo believes the key was a trap, but Julia declines it. On Julia's persistence, the couple decides to visit the mother once again and give her some food and groceries as she is alone and sickly. Meanwhile, Alma takes away Marta, saying that the little girl can have fun with her nephew Sergio. As a result, the two little kids become fast friends. On the other hand, Alex and Emilia get a pair of unexpected visitors. Rosa and her father from the resistance are convinced that Alex leaked the news about the transport to the soldiers, so they start assaulting him and point a pistol at him. But not long after, Emilia retrieves her own gun and threatens the visitors to surrender. The group has a decent talk with each other. However, Rosa believes Emilia sold them out since she is friends with Luis. Just then, they hear a knock at the door, so Rosa and her father quickly hide. Bigona stands at the door, pointing out that she heard a commotion from inside. Emilia brushes her off, handing over a bottle of wine. However, the informant does notice a gun in Alex's hand. Soon after, soldiers arrive at the place as it turns out Bigona informed them about the gun. The soldiers start rummaging through the place, looking for evidence. Meanwhile, Rosa and her father remain hidden on the other side of the room. Thankfully, they aren't caught, but Emilia's place is ransacked and the soldiers also take away some of her inventories. Elsewhere, Hugo and Julia visit Carla's mother and bring over some warm soup and groceries for her. While Hugo is fixing her kitchen sink, a homeless man attacks him from behind. The man threatens Hugo with a knife and asks for the food they brought for the old woman. Suddenly, Carlos appears from behind and subdues the bugler. Carlos knows it's dangerous to visit his mother and that he could inadvertently endanger her since he was ordered not to do so by Major Enrique. Therefore, he left the key at Julia's place the other night so that she would come and look after his mother. Hugo is understandably shocked to see Carlos alive. Carlos begs him not to tell Julia and his mother about him, not just yet. After a brief conversation with Hugo, he leaves his mother's place. At Alma's house, Hugo, Julia, and Marta are there serving part of her celebration party for her new job. The new director of epidemiology gives a fine speech, making a vow that her team will soon find a cure for the virus. Luis, during Alma's celebratory party, gets to know of a horrible government conspiracy from his best friend Salvador, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. For some reason, Salvador looks very disturbed and warns Luis that whoever is involved in the conspiracy will come after them. Additionally, he tells Luis that there will be devastating and permanent consequences. Although it is insinuated that Alma might be involved and hundreds of lives are at stake, Luis refuses to believe it. Before leaving the party, Salvador anxiously hands over Luis a paper consisting of an address and begs Luis to go there if something happened to him. He then bids farewell to his beloved friend and colleague like it's his last day. Luis is rather confused by this odd behavior of Salvador. As Hugo and Julia also call it a day, they discover that Marta has fallen asleep alongside Sergio. The couple tries their best to awaken the kid just when Alma arrives at the room. She then swoops on this opportunity, insisting that Marta stays at the house. Left with no choice, the couple complies with their boss's suggestion. Hugo then takes Julia to an abandoned place, where Carlos is waiting for them. Julia and her boyfriend finally have an awaited reunion as they embrace each other. Meanwhile, Alma has her nurses take blood from Marta and surprisingly from Sergio as well. It turns out that her nephew is also one of her victims.